from Music for All and presented by Yamaha. Welcome to teaching social emotional learning through music. And now, here's your host, Scott Edgar.
Hi, welcome to our next episode of Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music. I'm Scott Edgar. So up until now, every single one of our episodes has been centered around music for all. Well, another hat that I wear is Director of Practice and Research for the Center for Arts Education and Social and Emotional Learning. And let's pay really close attention to that, Director for Arts Education. And we're becoming more and more aware of how important it is to realize what social and emotional learning looks like across all of the arts, not just music, but dance, visual art. And today, we have the honor of exploring what social and emotional learning looks like in theater education. And just such a supreme honor today to welcome my friend and colleague, Cory Wilkerson. Cory, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Scott. So glad to be here.
Yeah. You and I have had these conversations before. We're in the middle of working on several projects. And you've heard me say that if I wasn't going to go into music education, well, I was going to be in theater education in one way, whether that be directing or acting. So an area that is close to my heart, but I have to be very honest. I was a newbie in theater education until I started to work with Cory. And Cory has opened my eyes and heart to really the depth that we can explore in theater education. And as music educators, let's just be honest. Oftentimes, the only space that we really engage with theater is, well, we're called in to do the musical and we can direct the pit orchestra. But there are so many more rich opportunities that we're going to explore today. So welcome, Cory. Cory, can you just take a few seconds and introduce yourself to us so we can get to know a little bit about you?
Sure. So I'm a former theater educator. I work as the Chief Learning Officer at the Educational Theater Association, which has been like coming home because I was a thespian as a high school student, Thespian of the Year in Herkimer, New York, and now working to help guide professional development options for theater educators is just my passion.
So great. The path, it sounds to me like when you were in Herkimer, New York, Thespian of the Year, that was one of the things that really connected you. That was your identity, and it led to a lifelong passion. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be a theater student? And was there a moment in your life when you said, this is what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to dedicate my life to?
Yeah, there absolutely was. So from the time I was a small child, I was always a storyteller, an imaginative thinker. When I was 3, I thought I came from the moon, and I had a whole story about that. And then when I was in middle school, the high school students came to the middle school to do a version, kind of an abbreviated version of what was then the fall musical. And I was hooked. That was it. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be my theater teacher. And so I became one and then ended up here.
And now you have the opportunity to work with thousands of theater educators across the country and being able to deepen their experience. How cool is that?
Yeah, I'm so honored to have this position. Yep.
So, Cory, given that this audience is primarily music educators, can you share with us a little bit about the world of theater education? What are some priorities? What are some challenges? Because my guess is we live in silos, but my guess is the things that music educators are experiencing are pretty similar to what the things that theater educators are experiencing.
I think you're absolutely right, Scott. And a lot of what we're concerned about at EDTA right now is the teacher's journey and how to support our teachers. We understand that there's a lot of pressures on schools and on teachers, and maybe that didn't exist before. So new things to think about. We're seeing a growing and wonderfully welcome concern about supporting social and emotional needs of teachers and students, and how can we as a theater educator do that? Where are the connections? And also just thinking about culturally responsive teaching, thinking about our students as individuals and how we bring that into the classroom, which really circles back to social and emotional learning as well. So I think we have a lot of the same things that you and I have been talking about and that teachers everywhere are talking about, but especially come to the arts educator where most often the students have found a home there in that arts classroom, be it music or theater or visual arts or dance.
That identity that we talk about so often in the space of
Hmm.
social and emotional learning. You just spoke to it from your own experience as a student when the high school came to the middle school, and that was your identity from that point on, part of your
Yeah.
identity. You talked a little bit there about some of the challenges that
Mhm.
teachers are having to adapt to. Um, and we talk about life cycles of teachers. We have those new teachers who are coming in. We have the teachers who
Yeah.
have been there for maybe 5 to 15 years, those mid career teachers, and then the late career teachers. And each one of those periods has some challenges associated with them. When we're talking about social and emotional learning, we're finding, especially in the music area, that the newer teachers, this is part and parcel of what they believe in. They're actually not even
Mhm.
coming in giving us an excuse. They're saying, no, this is going to be part of my
Mhm.
instruction because I believe in this. The mid career, wow, I really have to adapt to this. In the late career, sometimes you got those people who are like, I'm all in, but sometimes it's like, wow, this wasn't the cloth that I was cut from. What do we see in theater education that kind of maps onto that in terms of career life cycles of teachers and how receptive they are to some of these new, I'll call them initiatives, but it's so much deeper than initiatives, some of these new core beliefs that we're trying to embed into
Mhm.
arts education?
I think there's always been a natural affinity for theater educators to thinking about social and emotional learning. So much of what we do as a theater educator has to do with feelings and a character's feelings, your feelings about the role, feelings that are stirred up or triggered perhaps by a role you're taking on, a show that you're seeing. This is part and parcel of life every day for theater educators, whether they're teaching performance, whether they're directing performance, as many of our music colleagues are doing as well, and whether they're teaching acting or even behind the scenes in the pressure and intensity of getting a production on its feet in technical theater. So there are so many natural connections already that theater educators are attuned to. I think for us at EDTA, what has been what the service we can bring and the piece we can bring to it is the groundbreaking work that you and the center are doing in making clear what social and emotional learning connections look like in theater, in articulating what we're already doing, and in making sure that we plan for this and embed this kind of thinking in curriculum every day that we teach.
Corey, thank you for your kind words. We're going to talk about our current project that's hopefully going to deepen that a little bit more. If I can ask us just to take a step back for 2 seconds, because I think sometimes, like I said, from a music perspective, our insight into what theater education is might be waving our hands for the pit orchestra for the musical. Can you talk just about what is some of the breadth that a theater curriculum could entail in a K-12 district?
Oh, sure, I'd be happy to. So, depending on how you structure curriculum, some of our members will end up teaching only kind of performance and acting skills and those kinds of things. Some of our members will end up teaching only technical theater. So, those production values, the lights, the sound, the makeup, the set, the costuming. And some will be asked to teach all of these things and have skill in teaching and expertise in teaching all of these things. I think that what we're trying to do is make sure we're reaching all of those different kinds of educators. In acting and performance, great connections to social and emotional learning, empathy in character work, social awareness as you examine your character, compare that character to yourself, self awareness as you really think about what does this role mean to me and why am I identifying with this show, and self-management, planning and structuring your memorization of lines, all of those things. In technical theater, in the production side, social awareness for sure, as you learn to work on a team under pressure, self awareness. What are my skills? What am I being called to? What can I do easily? What do I ask for help to do? Relationship building. How do I understand structures of relationships that work in a work environment, and who's in charge and when, and how do we negotiate that? Self management, time management to get things done. So many direct connections, no matter what you're teaching. And for our music colleagues listening, think about all of the connections you make as you direct the orchestra, as you direct the vocalist, as you perhaps are asked to take on direction yourself and begin to direct the entire thing. Think about all of those connections, deep connections with social and emotional learning skills.
Oh, Corey, you brought me back to when I was teaching high school and I was directing pit orchestras, and there is a point where the stage manager's in the back, but we're the people who are kind of guiding the show from the
Right.
front. Wow, absolutely, and those decisions, so many people come together, and thank you for highlighting those really explicit areas of social and emotional learning, because I think one of the things that many of our listeners are struggling with right now in the SEL space is the diverse definitions of SEL, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even the amorphous definitions of SEL, that it has just become so big and in some
Mm-hmm.
spaces in our country have become problematic, politically
Mm-hmm.
divisive. So I think the precision of language that you just offered is beyond essential. I don't think we can
Mm-hmm.
enact
That's a
anything
great point.
authentically without that precision of language. So if you could, you've already started on this, and maybe that you could add just a little bit in terms of maybe what's in your heart or a precise definition of what does SEL mean to you?
Oh, yes. SEL to me is really a, a big term for learning about yourself, for life skills. It's really about learning and practicing things like understanding myself and my emotions, um, learning how to empathize with others so that you can better understand them, building healthy relationships, learning and practicing skills to build healthy relationships, learning and practicing skills to set goals and accomplish what you'd like to do with your life, identifying and managing our own emotions. All of those things are just practical life skills that all humans need. And so to have the opportunity to take the rich, expressive portions of our art forms and use those to help students connect with these very needed life skills, I think is just such a wonderful place to be.
That is a such a perfect way of conceptualizing it. It's succinct, and I think a lot of us can really wrap our heads around it when it's put like that. Because I think sometimes people have confused SEL for many different things, and
Mm.
that's something that I see almost all of us able to rally around. So yeah, that makes sense to me. I agree with that. Corey, we're talking now about how music and theater explicitly come together, but I see theater, especially musical theater, as being one of the broadest ways for almost all arts to come in together.
Yeah.
So we see spaces for dance to come in, we see space for visual arts to come in, set construction, costumes. How is EdTA and your work specifically trying to get us outside of those silos? Do you do work with music educators? Do you do work with dance educators, with visual artists?
We do. So there are a couple of initiatives that EDTA is involved in that are really exciting. One is something called the Connected Arts Network. It is a grant initiative. We received funding collectively, all of the arts associations, so the Educational Theater Association, the National Art Education Association, the National Dance Educators Association, and the National Association for Music Education. All of us are partnering together on this grant. We are teaming teachers in professional learning communities by discipline, but then also sponsoring cross-discipline trainings. And these teachers are getting training in social and emotional learning skills and including supports in the curriculum, in in diversity and inclusion skills, and also supporting students in that way and in leadership. So that's a wonderful initiative that crosses disciplines. We always welcome as well our music colleagues here at EDTA. We have a lot of members who are music educators as well as theater educators. And we have two great initiatives coming up that may be of interest to your listeners. We have something called the New Theater Teacher Course. It is starting, it would be perfect, especially if you have just been assigned. You've taken your position, you've been teaching several years, but maybe for the very first time, your administrator calls you in and says, guess what? You're going to teach an introduction to theater class in the fall, and you're going to direct the spring musical. Surprise! Well, we have an answer with this new theater teacher course. It will be offered at our conference in September 26th through the 29th in Minneapolis, but also in a virtual version deliverable from our website. And it will cover directing skills down to the basics. How do I set up auditions? How do I create a rehearsal schedule to get from A to Z in time by the deadline? How do I choose a show? In addition to tips on teaching theater and how you can include teaching theater into performance spaces, and also on how to thrive as a first year teacher or the first time you've taken on directing that musical, teaching a beginning theater course. We are also will be doing this summer, open to anyone, a culturally responsive teaching intensive, where we'll be working for a week with inspired by the seminal work of Dr. Goldie Muhammad and her book Unearthing Joy. We're going to be looking at the 5 pursuits of identity, skill, intellect, criticality, and joy, and how that really speaks to the heart of the lesson. It's called Heart of the Lesson Plan, and we would welcome anyone who's interested. And that's running July 22nd through the 26th, also available through our website. So happy to work cross-discipline. We welcome you. Please come and check us out.
Cory, oh my goodness, just you say the word Dr. Muhammad and I'm in. Uh,
Yeah.
Absolutely so powerful. You used a word that I'm so thrilled you did, because I think right now many of our teachers right now are in survival mode. And I think it's just, how do I survive? How do I get to June? How do I get through the spring
Mm-hmm.
musical? How do I survive? And you use the word thrive. And I think survival's not enough. And I think you and I are kindred spirits, that when we embrace identity, belonging, and agency, that it gets us closer to that space of thriving.
I agree. And for teachers as well. We've been talking a lot about SEL, Scott, and kind of student focused, but I think we need to think about SEL for our teachers as well. How do we as educators meet our own needs? How do we seek help when we need help? How do we become emotionally aware? And I know, and I bet music educators are in the same boat. Boy, when it's time to get that spring performance up, you don't eat, you don't sleep, you just do what it takes. So how do we find ways to support ourselves so that we don't do those kinds of things and overextend ourselves? SEL is important for teachers too.
100%. 100%. Tech week. I remember those tech weeks, and it was like,
Hmm.
okay, school, the bell rings and you're going till 9, 10 o'clock, wash, rinse, repeat the next day. And
Hmm.
the shows are that weekend. The schedule that
Yeah,
putting on a production necessitates. Yes.
let's
Time
face it.
management is just the tip of the iceberg. So, Cory, we've been sniffing at this, and you gave us some really nice examples across different broad areas. But I would love if you could help us visualize a little bit, because I think a lot of
Sure.
us believe that as music teachers or as arts educators, that the work we do, what we can learn from each other, is really, really powerful. So, are there a few ways that maybe you can help us envision in a theater classroom what SEL could look like? You and I have used the terms embedded, intentional, sustained, and I think by this point, most of our
Yeah.
listeners are familiar with those terms. But thinking about how we can really authentically embed SEL into theater education, what could that look like?
Sure. So let me take you through a typical theater class, and I'm going to try to think as broadly as I can. So whether it is a technical theater class or an acting and performance theater class, almost every theater class will start with some sort of opening. How do we and to do that consciously is the first step in thinking about SEL. How do I transition students from where they came into my classroom, where I'm probably going to ask them to do some risk taking? So it's especially important that we think about that transition moment. Simple ways to do that. You could have a word wall that shows emotions and just do a quick check in. It doesn't even have to be out loud so that you're not putting a student on the spot. They could simply put a magnet on the word that's most likely they're feeling right now. So that acknowledges their identity, it acknowledges their emotions in a very simple way, very quickly, quick to incorporate, and it begins in the right tone. I see you. I recognize you have emotions. You recognize your emotions too. Then a circle. We talked a lot as we worked on the book together about the circle of belonging. A circle is really important. I know it's not possible for every class, but some sort of joining into community, I think, is possible for every class. So we've identified, here's what I'm bringing into this space. Here's how I belong in this space, identity, belonging, and then give some agency within that. How would you like to start? Often when I taught acting, I would have warm up exercises and I would say, how would you like to warm up our actors' tools of body, mind, and voice? You can choose, you know what's here, or ask students to help lead those. So, again, another touch point for identity, agency, and belonging. As you go through the class, maybe it's studying a character, or in technical theater, maybe you're working on a design. Think about how you can bring the students' identities into the room. Ask them their experiences. Put a bullet point in it to say identities are important. Who we are is important. Knowing who we are and what we bring to the design process or the process of creating a character all matters. And how does your identity connect with this, or where are the places where you disconnect? That's building empathy. It's also building social skills as you think about being part of a group of diverse personalities and identities, whether it be in the fictional world of the play or in the real life world of the classroom. Closing exercises are really important so that the students, again, can make the shift, can recognize where they are now, can leave behind anything that may have been brought up if it's a difficult role or something happened in their class, and be prepared to move on to the next class. These are just little tiny places, but if we do this intentionally, if we embed it routinely, and if we articulate to students. So if I am using a word wall with emotions, rather than simply have students do this and then come sit in the circle, I might say to them, I find it very helpful to identify the emotion I have and to let it go. So let's take a breath together. Now that I know where my head is, let's take a breath together and prepare for the next one. So making that learning visible, articulating why we're doing what we're doing, and embedding it as a practice in your curriculum, I think is what's important, no matter what subject you're teaching.
And Cory, thank you. That was brilliant. You and I have talked a lot about embedded, intentional, sustained, and you were the one who taught me about visible, that was just an essential part,
Mhm.
that if we maintain our space as the wizard behind the curtain, we're not doing anyone any favor. So that visibility of saying, this is what we're doing, here's how it could be beneficial, and then enact it. That visibility was that last piece that I think oftentimes we miss, because, it's something that I'm starting to explore in my own thinking. And it's the difference between social and emotional teaching and social and
Mhm.
emotional learning. And the learning happens when we give our students the opportunity to practice these skills. The teaching happens when we tend to lecture about these things. It's a good idea to be vulnerable. Yes, go be vulnerable. Well, we're not practicing, we're not creating that space. So I really appreciated that example. If you could share just a little bit more, because you taught me a lot about this idea of intimacy training. And I think there's a lot of
Mm.
things that we can glean from that in music education, and how that can impact how we interact with our students. Because, in theater education, it might be, a physical scene whenever two folks have to dance, touch,
Mhm.
might be some kind of intimacy, might be a fight scene. In music education, we have moments where our students are working one-on-one with duets. There's a different level of intimacy, but I think there's some things we can learn from this. So could you share a little bit about this? And in my mind, I'm thinking this is at the heart of identity and belonging. So if you could share a little bit about that, I think we could really learn a lot in the field of
Sure.
music ed.
And I want to preface this with saying that I am in no means an intimacy director or anyone trained in intimacy choreography, but I am a proponent, and I feel very passionately that this is an important part of theater education, or wherever we are asking students to be vulnerable and to touch, and to maybe put themselves out there in ways that are unfamiliar for them or uncomfortable. Really, at the heart of intimacy training, it's about both identity and agency. So it's about knowing what makes you feel uncomfortable, and knowing how to, and being given permission to express that, making space in our classrooms and in our productions to allow students to express that, and about setting boundaries and allowing each individual to set their own boundaries. So what an intimacy choreographer will do, the first thing they will do is they will teach students to ask for permission for anything. A simple exercise that I've done with my classes is just to think about personal space, so that you have two actors on a diagonal walking towards each other, And I ask them to stop and identify when it feels uncomfortable. And that just brings up the question of what is personal space and why is this important? Then the intimacy choreographer will go deeper with that, and we'll talk about asking for permission. Will help you work through it. It will allow the space for students to identify where that space is, where they feel uncomfortable, and not ask the student to go beyond that. Oftentimes, students are asked to do kisses or other physical touch that will be awkward for two students who don't know each other. This gives them another alternative, how to do this. And a good intimacy choreographer will help you decide, will help first the students set up those boundaries, and then will help you decide how to work within those boundaries. Will help you as the director figure out, well, if this student just is not comfortable with a kiss, what do we do here? How can we give the illusion that will work and keep our students safe and give them agency over what makes them feel comfortable and safe on stage?
Cory, thank you for that. So, a little bit of the reason why I wanted to explore this is one of the avenues of Music for All is Bands of America, and color guard is a huge area
Mhm,
and oftentimes very dance based, very movement based, and
mhm,
they're touching. And I think some of this thought of how we navigate this on stage very much could translate to things that we need to think about in our field. So I appreciate you getting us to think and setting the literal stage for us to be aware of students needing to set boundaries. And I think we can all go
mhm,
to the conclusion of why that's an important life skill
mhm.
for us all to have to carry outside of the work we're doing in arts education. So, Cory, oh, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, no, I just was going to build on that. It also is very culturally responsive.
Sure.
In some cultures, different forms of touch are may even be forbidden. So
Right.
it's also very culturally responsive for your students. Thank you for
Absolutely.
thinking of that.
Absolutely. Um, so I'm really, really excited to use this show as a space to sort of announce a project that Cory and I have been working on for I'm going to say years, but it's about ready to come to fruition, my friend. So would you please share about this next step that we're about to take to meld, to embed social and emotional learning into theater education?
I am so excited to share that Scott and I are about to publish a book. It's called Pathways to Joy and Meaning Through Theater Education and Social and Emotional Learning. And it is all about the topics we've been talking about specific to theater education. So, those of you who know Scott know that he's already published a groundbreaking book on a similar line for music education. Well, this builds on that and talks about theater education. And I'm so proud to be a partner with you in the work.
And mutual. I mean, Cory has gotten me to think in so many different ways and expand. And a lot of our new thinking that we're starting to embed into SEL is a direct result of the conversations that we've had. So we can expect to see this towards the end of 2024 in press from GIA Publications. And we are so honored to be able to share this resource and to be able
Absolutely.
to come and talk to teachers about this in a new way. So we cannot wait. So, Cory, if we get this right, if SEL becomes embedded
Mhm.
into theater education, how can it transform what is already just such a meaningful art form for so many?
Mm.
You shared it was part of your identity as a student, certainly was part of mine, some fond memories. What's the next step? How can we level up and how can SEL help us do that?
Yeah, I think so. I've been thinking a lot about that, how transformative this is and how exciting this work is and why it's so exciting to me. And I think what's so exciting to me is connecting the dots between what I always intuitively knew I was doing and concrete methods and thinking about how to make it clear what I'm doing so that students can then take this learning and transfer this learning into their life decisions. So the students know too that we're think of the terms they use. They call it a family, and they know we're doing something special and important. And they know somewhere inside of them it's really useful, but they're not sure how. But if we connect those dots, then the magic happens twice as strong,
Twice as strong and exponentially from there. Oh my goodness.
exponentially.
Cory, this has been such an honor to share space, to be able to have a great conversation about how theater education and SEL come together, and some curveballs where we started to explore intersections between music education and theater education. Thanks for coming on that journey with us. Any last thoughts before we sign off?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to put a plug in for my association.
Please.
Please do stop by our website at www.schooltheater.org, and that's spelled THRE, schooltheater.org. And stop by and see the resources. Come and join us in the culturally responsive program that we're having this summer about the heart of the lesson plan, or take a peek at our new theater course, either online or in our conference September 26th through the 29th in Minneapolis.
Anytime that you can spend time with Cory Wilkerson is time well spent, friends. I highly encourage you go to the website. We'll make sure to put the link into the show notes so that you know where to find it.
Awesome.
And this is not the last time you're going to hear from Cory. Such a gift to the profession, such a gift to theater education, and just such a personal gift to me to be able to call Cory friend. So, Cory, many thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. A pleasure.
Thank you, friends. I wish you the best. For Music for All, I'm Scott Edgar. Take care.